Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we are analyzing the daily edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 12th December 2020. The topics to be discussed today are reflected on your screen and the timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So let's start. We will begin our today's discussion based on this very well written article given on page number 6 titled Pointing the Finger at Parliamentary Scrutiny. Well, this article has been written by one of the former Secretary General of the Lok Sabha, PDT Achari. And in this article, he is talking about the process of legislative scrutiny of a bill. And it is a very well written article in very simple words. And I feel legislative scrutiny of the bills can be an important topic as far as your mains paper is concerned. Since this topic is related to Parliament, of course, it will form part of GS paper 2 under the category of polity and governance. Well, as far as the context is concerned, you all know that India is currently reeling under a very strong protest from the farmers against the 3 farm bills which the government recently passed in the monsoon session. Now, though there have been negotiations going on between the farmers' union and the government, but to no avail. In fact, the farmers are hell-bent and very persistent that they want these laws to be repealed. Hence, in this context of the farmers' protest, the author is saying that this farmers' protest is a clear indication that there has been a lapse on the government side as far as management of legislative process is concerned. Now, when a bill is passed in the parliament, it follows a certain process. And one of the most important part of that process is the scrutiny of that bill by certain expert committees. Furthermore, what is now surprising is that the government is saying that they are willing to make certain changes in the bill, the concerns of the farmer. But the irony here is that the changes which the government now want to make in this bill are the same changes which were earlier suggested in the parliament when these bills were actually being debated. But at that time, the government paid no heed to these suggestions and passed the bill in its current form, which is now facing the wrath from the farmers' union. Therefore, in this context, today we will be talking about the importance or the role of parliamentary committees as far as scrutiny of bills are concerned. Now, since we are discussing this article from a mains perspective, I do not want to delve into the prelims part of it, but I feel it will be better if I can very quickly tell you how a bill is passed in the parliament. I'm sure you are aware about it, but just so that you can better relate, I will quickly revise it. So, as far as an ordinary bill is concerned, it can be introduced in either house of the parliament. And after being introduced, the bill has to go through 5 stages in the parliament before it can actually enter the statute book. In the first reading of the bill, it is introduced by a minister or any other member into the house. And at this stage, no discussion takes place, only the bill is published in the Gazette of India. And then comes the second reading. It is in the second reading that the bill gets not only a general but a very detailed scrutiny as well. And in this stage, the bill takes its final shape. Now, in the second reading stage only, we have certain sub-stages. The first is the stage of general discussion, where a general discussion on the broad contents and contours of the bill takes place. And then comes the stage which is relevant to this article, that is the committee stage. Now, the usual practice is that a bill is referred to a select committee of the House, and then this committee examines the bill thoroughly in detail, clause by clause. And then it can also recommend certain amendments. Then after the committee stage comes the consideration stage. After the House has received the bill from the select committee, it considers the provision clause by clause, and then the bill is discussed and voted upon. Then is the third reading, where the bill is either accepted or rejected as a whole. And after that, in the fourth stage, the bill moves to the second house and the same process is followed again in the second house as well. And if the bill is passed by the second house, then it finally goes to the president for his assent. Now, in this article, the author has used very strong words. He says that there has been lapse in the management of legislative work. And the reason he is saying this is the protests which are happening across the country to repeal these 3 laws altogether. Now, we all know about the Parliament of India. Parliament of India is the supreme law-making body. However, being a democracy, one of the most important functions of the Parliament is to be a house of deliberation and discussion. So though Parliament is the supreme law-making body of our country, this law-making process does not happen in isolation. It is a deliberative process in which all the elected representatives of our country take part in the discussions and deliberations, and only then a law is made which is to affect the entire citizens of this country. And realizing the value of such an important role, the Parliament in India has a process or a proper machinery in place in the form of certain committees to scrutinize the bill. Now, coming to what is the process of this scrutinization in the Parliament. Now, first thing, remember that the scrutinization process has been provided for in the rules of the respective houses. It has not been given in the Constitution or in any other statute book. It is written in the rules of the House, that is, rules of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, respectively. Now, as I was telling you earlier, the stages in which a bill is passed. Well, in the second reading, when the bill has had a general discussion, then the presiding officer of the House, that is the Speaker in case of Lok Sabha and the Chairman in case of Rajya Sabha, they refer the bill to the concerned committee, to the concerned standing committee. Now, you know that in India, we have two kinds of committee. One is the standing committee, which are permanent in nature, and the other is the ad hoc committee. Now, standing committees are also of various types, and a further subclassification of the standing committee is the departmental standing committees. And usually it is these departmental standing committees to whom we refer the bills concerned with that particular ministry or department for further scrutiny. Now, here the catch is that this decision of the presiding officer whether to refer the bill to the concerned standing committee or not for the scrutiny is a discretionary power of the presiding officer. By this I mean it is not compulsory as per the rules of the houses that the presiding officer has to refer each and every bill to a particular standing committee. Therefore, it is up to the presiding officer whether he wants to do so or not. Now, the next question which you should ask is why this a discretionary power? If the process of scrutinization of bill is so important, why has it been left to the discretion of the presiding officer? Well, the answer is very simple. Not all bills which are introduced into the parliament are very serious or important in nature. We have certain bills which only include certain minor amendments to an already passed act, or there are bills which have no serious ramifications. Hence, it is felt that it would rather be counterproductive if each and every bill which tries to bring even the smallest of change is referred to a standing committee. That will be a wastage of resources and time. Hence, it has been left to the discretion of the presiding officer to decide which bill should be referred or which bill should not be referred. But having said so, though it is the discretionary power of the presiding officer, it is nowhere correct that the presiding officer decides against sending such an important bill to a standing committee which has such serious ramifications, because this in turn, if the presiding officer does so, will defeat the entire process of scrutinization of bill or of why we have certain standing committees in the first place. Now, most of the time, the government always requests the presiding officer to not send the bill to the concerned standing committee. And since it's the discretionary power and no one can force the presiding officer, many a times the presiding officer does accede to the request of the government. Moving ahead, when the presiding officer refers the bill to the concerned standing committee, then the committee invites the various stakeholders concerned with the main objective of the bill to discuss the bill with them. Then the committee, if it feels, makes necessary changes in order to align the contents of the bill, the aims and objectives of the bill with the wishes of various stakeholders, and then sends its report with these recommendations to the government. Now, here comes the second catch. All the reports or all the recommendations of these standing committees or any other committees for that matter are advisory in nature. That is, they are not binding on the government to accept the recommendation of these committees. Therefore, these two provisions, the discretionary power of the presiding officer and the advisory nature of the recommendations of these standing committees, is something which makes this process a little futile. Now, in this article, moving ahead, the author also mentions a little about the history of this legislative scrutiny process. Well, as per him, the provision to have a bill scrutinized by a certain expert committee or select committee was provided for the first time in the Montague Chelmsford Reform of 1919, or also known as the Government of India Act in 1919. The Government of India Act of 1919. Now, at that time in 1919, the Central Legislative Assembly functioned as the Parliament of British India, and this Central Legislative Assembly set up three committees as per what was given in the Montague Reforms. These three committees included Committee on Petitions relating to the bill, second, Select Committee on Amendments to the bill, and third was the Select Committee on Bills. Hence, this shows us that even the colonial parliament realized the importance of having a parliamentary scrutiny of the bills. Moving ahead, before the Parliament of India provided for proper and permanent standing committees, the Indian Parliament used to appoint certain select committees or certain joint select committees to carry out the detailed scrutiny of important legislative bills. Now, what is interesting about these select committees is that these select committees were usually established on the proposal of the opposition. So, the government of the day and the opposition used to meet informally and decide on the fact that a select committee should be appointed in order to better scrutinize the bill. Hence, this practice where the opposition's proposal was taken into consideration can be considered as a very healthy practice of the Parliament of India. Lastly, coming to what is the advantage and relevance of such scrutinization process. Now, this is important as far as your mains is concerned. Well, the advantage of these parliamentary committees is that these parliamentary committees help to avoid conflicts and future protests, for example, what we are witnessing currently in our country. And this it does so by carrying out careful deliberation and scrutinization of the bill beforehand, so that when the bill finally gets made into a law, it is not incongruent with the aspirations or the demands of the concerned stakeholders. Secondly, it helps to strengthen the functioning of our parliament and the process of the parliament. And this in turn makes India a more efficient democracy. Because the same thing, the committees scrutinize the bill and they tell the government what is amiss. And then in a very healthy way, the government can realize the shortfalls of the bill, the shortcomings of the bill, and can improve upon it, finally delivering to the people what they want. Thirdly, as far as the working of these committees are concerned, these committees work on consensus. Now, usually as far as standing committees or departmental standing committees are concerned, they consist of members from all the party. And then these committees work together in order to scrutinize the bill. Hence, these committees are devoid of any kind of party bias, irrespective whether the MP belongs to the ruling party or the opposition party. They work together for the best interest of the people. Furthermore, these committees have a very flexible way of working, which is not as rigid as the houses work in particular. And then another important point is that these committees take into consideration the expert opinion or the public opinion on that particular bill. As I was mentioning earlier, when these bills are referred to these committees, they call in the various stakeholders for discussion. Hence, whatever is the need and the demand of the people gets conveyed to the government very effectively. Lastly, they make the functioning of the parliament more inclusive. As I was saying, members from opposition and all parties get a chance to be get a chance to be an effective part of the parliamentary process, of the legislative process, as they all play an important part in the discussion or the scrutiny of this bill. Lastly, the discussion or the deliberation which is carried out in these committees is very responsible and responsive in a way, where these MPs only have the best interest of the country at large in their mind and work in a very consensual manner, taking into account the opinion of each and everyone. Lastly, in this article, the author has mentioned certain bills which were passed after being recommended or after being evaluated by a parliamentary committee. For example, we have the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Bill of 1999. Now, this bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha and then was referred to a joint committee of the houses. Now, the aim of the bill was to develop new varieties of plants and to protect the rights of the farmers. Therefore, the committee suggested many improvements by bringing in greater clarity into the various terms and concepts of this bill. Similarly, we had the Seed Bill of 2004. Not just the bills related to agriculture, even the Companies Amendment Bill, the Information Technology Bill, and as recent as the GST, all these were first referred to either a select committee or a parliamentary committee for proper scrutinization. Even the Lokpal and Lokayukta bill, which was introduced in the Lok Sabha in 2011, was referred to a select committee when it was transferred to the Rajya Sabha. Hence, the Lokpal bill got double scrutiny both in Lok Sabha as well as in the Rajya Sabha. However, the current problem is that these three farm bills were not referred to the Departmental Standing Committee of Agriculture. If at all it would have, probably this ongoing protests which are happening could be avoided. Hence, keeping all these points in mind, the basic idea is whenever such important bills which have such important consequence or ramification on the country is introduced into the parliament, it should be referred to a committee for its proper scrutinization so that only a bill which is absolutely fit for the people of this country finds a place in the statute book. With this, let's take up our next news. This next news appears on page number 5, titled Delimitation should be based on 2031 Census. Well, the context of the news is that recently the Pranab Mukherjee Foundation released a paper on the eve of the late president's birth anniversary, and as per this paper, they have suggested that the next delimitation exercise should be carried out in 2 steps. First, a delimitation should be set up to redraw the boundaries of the constituencies based on 2031 census, and then secondly, a states reorganization act should also be passed in order to split the states into smaller ones. Hence, in this context today we will be talking about delimitation. First things first, what exactly is delimitation? Well, delimitation means the act or the process whereby you are fixing the boundaries or limits of territorial constituencies in a country or in an area which has a legislative body. So the process of fixing limits is known as delimitation. Now in India, as per Article 82, it is the parliament which has been given the power by the constitution to decide the manner in which and the authority which will carry out this delimitation process. Hence, accordingly, the Parliament of India enacts the Delimitation Act after every census in order to carry out the delimitation process. And once this Delimitation Act comes into force, then the central government constitutes a delimitation commission. Till now in India, 4 delimitation commissions have been constituted, namely 1952, 63, 73 and 2002. So here you will notice that we had no delimitation commission in 83 and 93. The reason for which I will tell you later. Now coming on to the next question, what is the purpose of delimitation? Why do we actually need delimitation? Well, as you are aware, India is a very populous country and every year the population is growing. So after every 10 years, it is but obvious that the demography of an area or of a constituency in particular will change in terms of the number of people or the population we have in that constituency. So the basic idea is that every constituency, whether it is for the Lok Sabha election or for the state legislative election, every constituency should more or less have equal number of people so that each and every citizen of this country gets a proper representation in the Lok Sabha or in the state legislative assembly. Hence, in order to assure that equal representation is given to equal segment of the population, we carry out the delimitation process. Because it is not just the number of people, we also have to look after the various segments or various classes of the people. So for example, as you know, in India we reserve seats for SC and ST category people in the Lok Sabha. So this function is also carried out by the Delimitation Commission because we want to assure that these ST and SC community also get equal representation in proportion of their population in the Lok Sabha, and their socio-economic standing should not come in the way of the democratic representation. The second purpose of having a delimitation is to have a fair division of the geographical areas so that one political party cannot have advantage over the others in election. It is the same principle that every geographical area should have more or less the same number of people. And lastly, we are doing all this in order to uphold the principle of one vote, one value in India. As you know, in India, every person gets one vote and the value of every one vote in our country is equal. Hence, it should not be the case that due to mismatch in population, in a constituency of 1,000 people, let's say, only one person is being elected and then in the constituency of 100 people also, one person is getting elected. This will be against the principle of one vote, one value. Hence, this is the main purpose of having a delimitation exercise after every census. Next, let us talk about the Delimitation Commission. Well, the Delimitation Commission is a high-powered statutory body. Please remember, Delimitation Commission is a statutory body and not a constitutional body. A lot many times students get confused because Article 82 talks about delimitation, hence they feel that delimitation is a statutory body. But as I was telling you, it is the Parliament who enacts the Delimitation Act, and once this act gets notified, then the Delimitation Commission is constituted. Hence, this Delimitation Commission is constituted under a statute, that is the Delimitation Act. Hence, it is a statutory body and not a constitutional body like the EIC or the Election Commission of India, which has been provided for directly in the Constitution. Furthermore, the Delimitation Commission is appointed by the President of India, and this commission works in collaboration with the Election Commission of India. As far as the composition of this commission is concerned, it has 3 members. It is headed by a retired Supreme Court judge, the Central Election Commissioner, as well as the respective state election commissioners. Next, as far as the functions of the Delimitation Commission is concerned, the number one function is to fix the number of seats as well as the boundaries of the constituencies in a state for the Lok Sabha and the State Legislative Assembly elections, because after every 10 years the population changes. Hence, in order to ensure that the constituencies have more or less the same population, the second function is to determine the number of seats that a particular state will get in Lok Sabha. Thirdly, the Delimitation Commission also fixes the number of seats which will be reserved for the ST and the SC whenever their population is relatively large. So these are the 3 main functions of the Delimitation Commission. Lastly, also remember that the orders of the Delimitation Commission cannot be challenged before any court of law. Hence, they are final and binding in nature. Now, lastly, coming to the aspect as to why there was no delimitation exercise in the 80s and the 90s. Well, let us start from the beginning. The 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 froze the allocation of seats in the Lok Sabha to the states, as well as the division of each state into territorial constituencies till the year 2000 at the 1971 level. Well, there was a reason for this. As you all must be aware, in the 1970s, one of the main agenda of the government was population control. In fact, the national government was very enthusiastic to carry out the family planning programs, and in fact, it asked the state governments also to control their population. Now, following this national goal, what happened is that southern states especially were able to control their population. They made good effort in population control measures, they had a good family planning program, and they were able to control their population. However, most of the northern states were unable to do so, and their population increased. Now then what happened in 1980s, when again the time became ripe to carry out the delimitation exercise, the southern states were against it. The reason is very simple. As I told you, in the Lok Sabha, the number of seats which are allocated to the state is based on the population of that state. Now, obviously, the southern states made an effort and controlled their population. However, since the northern states were unable to do so, their population increased. So, logically, what was to happen is that if the delimitation exercise would to be happen, the number of seats to the northern states in the Lok Sabha would have increased compared to the seats given to the southern states. And this, of course, in a way is unfair also. Why to punish the states who have actually made good progress as far as national goals is concerned? Therefore, considering this fact, the government decided that we will put a cap on the allocation of seats in the Lok Sabha to the state based on the 1971 level. So this was what happened in 1976. Then in 2001, the government passed the 84th Amendment Act. By this act, it said that, okay, we are again extending this ban on the readjustment as far as the number of seats to a particular state is concerned for another 25 years. That is, now we will carry out this process only after 2026. So the total number of seats to the states was again based on 1971, and it was frozen, and it got froze on the 1971 level up till the year 2026. However, the government realized that okay, it is fine that we are freezing the number of seats as far as the states is concerned. However, what they said is that we can allow the territorial constituencies in the states to be readjusted based on the population. So this way the states, as far as their seats in the Lok Sabha is concerned, will not get hurt. Hence, it allowed to undertake readjustment and rationalization of the territorial constituencies in the states based on the population figure of the 1991 census. Then again, we had the 87th Amendment Act. It said the same thing. There was ban on the number of seats of the various states in the Lok Sabha. However, it said that you can undertake the readjustment of the territorial constituencies now based on the 2001 census. So this was all about delimitation. This should be more than sufficient as far as your prelims are concerned. With this, let's take up our next news. Well, this news has been taken from page number 10, titled India is on track to reduce emissions. Now, recently, Prakash Javadekar, who is the Environment Minister, stated that India is well on track to meet its commitment under the Paris deal by the year 2030. Now, what were India's nationally determined contribution under the Paris deal, and what are the efforts which India is taking in order to tackle climate change? All of this I have discussed earlier, in fact recently, only 2-3 weeks back. So I'm going to attach that lecture in today's DNS so that you can revise it. This news we have taken from page number 9, titled Prime Minister for Integrated Fight Against the Climate Change. Now, at a side event of the G20 summit titled Safeguarding the Planet, the Circular Carbon Economy Approach, while addressing this event, Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, has stated that India is exceeding its Paris Accord targets and is well on its path to fight against climate change. Therefore, in this article today, we will be exhaustively covering the various initiatives undertaken by the Government of India to tackle climate change. But before talking about such initiatives, first let us see what were the targets or the nationally determined contributions set by India in the COP21, or also known as the Paris Agreement. Firstly, India promised by that 2030, it will achieve 1/3 reduction in its emission intensity of the GDP compared to the 2005 level. Secondly, it promised that by 2030, 40% of its installed power capacity will come from renewable or non-fossil fuel sources. And thirdly, it stated that by 2030, India will add additional carbon sink by adding additional forest and tree cover. Now, as party to the UNFCCC, India is to submit biennial update report. Now, as per the second BUR, or the biennial update report, which India submitted to the UNFCCC, it is stated that the emission intensity of India's GDP has reduced by 21% in the period starting from 2004 to 2014. Therefore, there is a vast reduction in its emission intensity, and this India was able to achieve only because of its proactive and sustained actions on climate change. Now, let us look at the initiative and sustained actions taken by India. First is the National Action Plan on Climate Change. Now, this plan identifies a number of measures which help not only in the country's development process but also helps India to tackle its climate change related objectives of adapting and mitigating to climate change. Then India has the National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency. Under this, we follow what is known as the PAT scheme, that is Perform, Achieve and Trade. And this PAT scheme was designed in order to reduce specific energy consumption. Then obviously we have the National Solar Mission, whose aim is to increase the mix of solar energy in the total energy mix of India. And of the total 100 gigawatt target which we have set for ourselves, we have already achieved 32.5 gigawatt of it. Then we have the National Water Mission. Now, the focus of the National Water Mission is to monitor the various water resources such as the groundwater, aquifer, etc. It also focuses on capacity building, monitoring the water quality, as well as other baseline study. Its aim is that we want to increase our water use efficiency by 20%. Then we have the National Mission for Green India. In this mission, we want to increase the tree and forest cover by 5 million hectares. And in addition to adding the new forest and tree cover, we also want to increase the quality of our existing forests. Next, we have the National Mission on Sustainable Habitat. Now, this National Mission on Sustainable Habitat is being implemented through three sub-initiatives or program, namely the Atal Mission on Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, also known as the Amrut Scheme, the Swachh Bharat Mission, which has been a spectacular success, as well as the Smart Cities Mission. Furthermore, India has also made mandatory or compulsory the Energy Conservation Building Rules of 2018 for all the commercial buildings. Moving ahead, we have what is known as the National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture. This mission focuses on food security and protecting our resources. In here too, we have set certain targets which include that we should have 3.5 lakh hectares of area under organic farming. We should increase the area under precision irrigation. We should increase the area under system of rice intensification, so on and so forth. In fact, this mission has resulted in the formation of the National Innovation on Climate Resilient Agriculture, which is a network project. Moving ahead, we also have the National Mission for Sustaining the Himalayan Ecosystem. Now, the main aim of this mission, as the name suggests, is to come out with a sustainable and a suitable management and policy measures in order to sustain the Himalayan ecosystem and environment. Next, we have the National Mission on Strategic Knowledge for Climate Change. In this mission, we want to build up a knowledge system which will inform us about what kind of actions do we need to take in order to make our development more ecologically sustainable. Under this, various excellence centers as well as climate change centers have been set up. Then we have the Climate Change Action Program. Now, this Climate Change Action Program is a central sector scheme, and the main idea of the scheme is to support as well as build capacity both of the central and the state government so that we can strengthen our fight against climate change and can also increase our capacity to withhold climate change. Next, we have what is known as the energy efficiency measures. Under this, we have the ECBC, which is the Energy Conservation Building Code. Now, this code prescribes the energy performance standards for construction of any new commercial buildings. And as per this ECBC code, such a new commercial building has to achieve 50% reduction in energy use by 2030. Furthermore, schemes like Ujala and LED bulb distribution has been performing very well. Furthermore, under the Street Light National Program, we have replaced conventional street lights with the LED street lights. Then we are also promoting the adoption of electric vehicle. This we are doing through the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan, the FAME India scheme, etc., whose major aim is to promote the manufacturing as well as the adoption of electric and hybrid vehicle technology in India. Next, we are also promoting the use of biofuel. We have the National Biofuel Policy of 2018, as per which we have the target where we want to blend 20% ethanol in petrol as well as 5% of biodiesel in the diesel by 2030. Then we have a fund for climate change. Now, we set up the National Adaptation Fund on Climate Change in the year 2015, which rather financially supports the adaptive activities and measures taken by the government in order to tackle climate change. And this is usually used by those states or UTs which are particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Now, this is a central sector scheme which is being implemented by NABARD. Next, we have the National Voluntary Guidelines on Social, Environment and Economic Responsibility. Now, the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs in 2011 developed the concept of National Voluntary Guidelines. Then furthermore, in the year 2012, SEBI mandated the Annual Business Responsibility Reporting, which is a reporting framework based on this National Voluntary Guidelines. And these guidelines serve as a driver to pursue sustainable management practices. Then lastly, we have the green bonds. Now, as the name suggests, green bonds are nothing but debt securities. Only thing the proceeds from these securities are used 100%, that is completely, to finance green projects and assets. In fact, after China, India is the second largest emerging market for green bond. Furthermore, a number of government agencies, Indian Renewable Energy Development Agency, as well as the Indian Railway Finance Corporation, etc., have all contributed to issue these green bonds. Then in the year 2018, SBI also entered the green bond market with the certified climate bond. Last but not the least, we have International Platform for Sustainable Finance. Now, this platform acknowledges the global nature of financial markets, thereby understanding the fact that these financial markets have the potential to finance actions and initiatives against climate change in order to achieve a low carbon and a climate resilient economy. India in 2019 became the part of International Platform on Sustainable Finance. So these are the most important and major initiative taken by the government to tackle climate change. Now this news also appears on page number 5 titled MahaSharad to be launched today. Well, this news is specific to the state of Maharashtra, but this can be used as a subpoint when you are writing an mains answer on the topic of people with disability. Well, the context is that to mark the 80th birthday of the NCP chief, Sharad Pawar, the Social Justice Department of the Maharashtra government has launched a digital platform and also an app known as MahaSharad, which will provide essential tools free of cost which are required by differently abled people. MahaSharad stands for Maharashtra System of Health Rehabilitation and Assistance for Divyang. Well, a lot of generous and philanthropic individuals donate various tools such as braille kit, hearing aid, wheelchair, artificial organs, etc. in the market, all such things which are required by people with disability. However, people with disability are unable to connect with such individuals. Therefore, the main purpose of this app is that it will help to connect such people with the needy, and the differently abled people can list the tools which they require on this platform, and the donors will then be able to help them out with those tools. Now, usually, Divyang or differently abled people are not having access to such important tools because they cannot afford it as they do not have the money. It is felt that this portal and the app will be able to help almost 29 lakh differently abled people. So nothing very important here, just you can use this MahaSharad app as an example whenever you're writing an answer on mains, especially the various efforts by the government to help Divyang or differently abled people.